Welcome to the Right Tack, where we help private practice owners face the headwinds of the healthcare industry. I'm Paul Jonas, CEO and co-founder of Breezy Billing and Phoenix Credentialing.
And I'm Jim Jonas, therapist, co-founder of Breezy Billing, Phoenix Credentialing, and the Jonas Center.
Today, we're joined by someone we're really excited to have on the show,
Yeah.
Amber Priestley. Amber is a licensed therapist and practice owner with over 15 years of experience in the behavioral health field. She's the owner of Skill Spark Therapy and also works as a business coach, helping therapists build sustainable, values-aligned private practices.
Yeah, Amber's also provides continuing ed workshops for other mental health professionals, spends a lot of time helping practice owners think critically about growth, whether that's staying solo, building a small collective, or navigating agency-style models.
And that's exactly what we're talking about today, the differences between solo practices, small collectives, and agency models, and how therapists can grow sustainably without losing autonomy or burning out.
Yeah. Amber, welcome to the Right Tack. We're glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me today, Paul and Jim. It's been a great ride over the last several years in the healthcare industry, and I am so excited to talk to you today about the state of therapy for those in private practice, those considering going into it, and all of the dynamics that we're dealing with and growing with in this industry today.
So before we dive in, we have to ask our favorite question. What's everybody doing this weekend? So Amber, what are you doing this weekend?
Well, I'm taking a scenic drive to Duluth, Minnesota. I have to return my 19-year-old to UMD. She is a first-year college student in the chemical engineering program, and she's been home with us for the month. We've been super grateful to have all of our kids home for the holidays, and I'm really grateful for that. And so we're returning her for hopefully her next half of her first year, and she's doing great. So we're excited.
Oh, yeah, that's a big
Fantastic.
deal. Yeah. I remember those days. So,
I will too soon.
oh, yes. Yeah.
Give me a few more years.
Yeah.
Dad, how about you? What do you got going on this weekend?
Well, exciting plans. Yeah. If I can get around to it. I got a new grill and I want to put it together. It came in a box, so that's my goal. If it's warm enough and I have some time, I'm putting my new grill together.
That sounds great.
What about you?
Let's see. So this weekend, tomorrow, I'm doing nothing. I don't have anything planned for tomorrow.
Do you want to help me with the grill?
Well, we'll have to see. We've talked about doing a little bowling with my youngest. My oldest is going to the Loppet this weekend, and he and some friends are going to go cheer on some of their fellow classmates in the Nordic ski race there. So he's out. So it's just just the three of us. We'll see what happens.
Bowling would be good. Yeah,
bowling's fun. All right. Well,
All right.
Well, let's get started. We can jump right into it.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about some of these practice models that we mentioned earlier. This is a pretty big decision. So as far as what a practitioner choosing that. So I don't know.
Yeah, Amber, can you walk us through the key differences between a solo practice, a small collective, and an agency model?
Absolutely, I can.
All right.
All of them have kind of a different feel. So we'll start with solo. If you like that full autonomy, making decisions for yourself, and sort of going asleep at night knowing that you have the front and the back end covered, then you might really love solo practice because being on your own there's a lot of freedom involved in that when you aren't managing anyone except for yourself. But it can get a little bit lonely if you're not good at networking or reaching out to other people and sort of building your personal brand in your solo practice. So if you are somebody who doesn't like to necessarily go it alone, but you are also, licensed to practice therapy, because of course it's easiest to be solo once you have your full unrestricted license to practice, you might choose a collective or a shared space where therapists are pretty much deciding to enter into agreements to strategically share resources. So usually they're maintaining their own businesses or their 1099s, working together and sharing space or resources for EHR and other things to make practice more sustainable. But then they have built-in colleagues and sort of a structure and benefit to being able to sort of curate a practice identity, right? Whether that's having a lot of different niches under the same roof and sort of complementing one another or specializing in something real specific. But usually, therapists and collectives, again, it's easiest if you're fully licensed and independent at the time. And it's also super important to enter agreements with people who have similar, beliefs and values around practice. If you are thinking, wow, being responsible for myself is, difficult, then you might choose to go with an agency or be employed by one, right, at first. So structure is important there, right? So if you're the person starting that agency or you're growing into an agency or group practice, as I like to sometimes call them, in that case, you usually like your leadership, or you're usually kind of drawn to a little bit more leadership, and there's a little bit more responsibility there for other people and for cultivating culture, systems, and structure. So you're usually mentoring people new to the field or helping pre-licensed clinicians enter the workplace or have their first jobs. So that's also, extremely rewarding on both ends, whether you choose to work for one or grow one.
And so what attracts therapists to each of these? You kind of got into it a little bit there. Or if not that, when someone's struggling with that decision, how do you help them think about it?
Yeah. I would say that really what therapists want is finding a balance between meaningful work and making a fair amount in exchange for that work that they're doing, right? That's all we're usually seeking, is to find a good work-life balance and be valued for the skill set that we're bringing. And some practice models allow more freedom of choice, but they of course come with more business risk. So, you can kind of decide what level you're willing to bear as a person that wants to start a business, right? If you're going solo, you're bearing all of it. And you kind of have to know not just how to be a therapist clinically, but you have to know some basics about business and how to manage accounting or other parts of, tax law or regulations that you might not have been taught about while you were going to grad school or learning how to be a therapist. So there's a lot of things that can attract people to working towards collectives or working in groups, because usually it's a little easier to market yourself. You have more people kind of creating a presence. And so that can be one of the things that attracts therapists to working sort of together. But either way, or no matter what way we're slicing or dicing it these days, over the years, therapist pay is pretty stagnant. And so it's getting harder to or design practices that have good work-life balance and, are competitive and paying therapists well and still able to maintain a margin that keeps the practice successful. So I'd say that, majorly, it's seeking better pay and working conditions. That's what draws therapists to private practice, because they're needing to make more, or they're needing to figure out how to capitalize on their skills and, make up for that gap in pay not really being increased year over year.
Right. Yeah, Amber, as you're talking, I was thinking, a few years ago when I started out as an individual practitioner, just back in 1985 or so. It was really scary to think about going out on my own and initially I just did part-time and had a full-time job and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I'm thinking about that, but in hindsight too, I'm going, I would not, it was worth the risk, and I do think people just starting out, it's like, well, is someone going to show up at my door? Am I going to get referrals? That kind of thing. And that might, you know, tend for people might tend to go for either a collective or an agency setting. I'm thinking as a result of that fear of not having anybody come to your door. I guess are there other trade-offs that you are seeing with the different models that we're talking about?
Right. Well, it kind of depends too on what kind of benefits you want access to, right? If
Mm,
you work in more of an agency setting or there are um, employees, you have access usually to more traditional benefits packages. You might be offered, retirement plan or access to a healthcare plan. Whereas if you're a solo practice or you're on your own, those things are fully funded by you as the business
hmm
owner, and also, those things tend to be less accessible, especially health insurance. Many solo practice owners are relying on a partner's insurance or some other avenue for obtaining healthcare coverage, because as a solo business, that's a super difficult trade-off, is not having that access to more traditional, work benefits. And
hmm
people also aren't paying attention to the costs of business, right? Revenue itself can appear deceiving. So you need to also include your overhead, your taxes, your expenses,
Hmm.
your essentials. And so just getting a great split isn't enough. You have to know really what you're getting and what you're not, and you should consider your overall compensation package. If you're a W-2, you can expect to see a little bit less, probably per hour, because you're not bearing all of the expenses associated with the practice. Where if you are your own business, you definitely are. And so how
hmm
you set things up and run things will be different.
Yeah, for
Absolutely.
sure. Yeah.
Don't we know? Um, so you've talked a little bit about sustainability and autonomy for therapists. Tell me a little bit more about how autonomy, like why that's such a critical piece of the long-term success for someone's practice.
Well, therapists are providing services to our communities that are so important and deserve to be valued. The business of therapy is definitely evolved over the years, and healthcare systems have gotten more difficult to work with. So, therapists who choose autonomy are having more choice now to diversify their income, add services or products to their businesses, opening up opportunities that aren't traditional one to one therapy, deciding to grow in unique ways through intensives, retreats, other types of business lines, rather than just considering being employed for someone or just doing, one type of thing, which is your clinical work for a full time amount of hours each week and then going home. So there's definitely a big change over the years in what I see as the goal for private
Mhm.
practice owners, right? There's a few different ways you can see people playing out. And some people like to build teams and build businesses that are beyond themselves. And other people really like to build a personal brand and keep it really
Mm,
small and solo. Um, Both options work great, but an important part of that is their ability to make decisions about their business, their ability to set their personal limits, and make decisions that work for them instead of just dealing with or getting a set of circumstances and having them apply to you. And a huge piece of advice that I do give to practice owners who are considering insurance, right? Because I mean, some people decide to go private all the way and they don't deal with insurance. But if you
Hmm.
do, take the time to contract yourself and credential yourself with insurance and avoid signing on with a venture capital platform or some other way of becoming solo, because this really restricts your autonomy and doesn't give
mm.
you as much
Hmm.
opportunity to grow your practice as you think it might.
Yeah, that independence thing is super important for us. You want to be able, if you have your own contracts, you have your own control, versus signing on with some of those bigger ones where they credential you, but you're on their contracts and then they get to dictate everything after that.
Yeah. Yuck. Yeah, I see that. Which is kind of runs me into this next question about, concerns about therapists being treated like, gig workers or like a cog in the wheel, that kind of thing. And I guess I'm wondering, what trends are you seeing that contribute to that? And historically too, I'm thinking, I've known some therapists in some of these businesses, and the requirements that are that are put on them as far as number of clients seen a week and how many intakes a week, et cetera, et cetera. So if you can speak to that, Amber.
Sure. Well, we all know the economy is a little rough. The job market hasn't been great over the last few years, and several platforms have become very large by contracting with solo therapists to provide therapy as like 1099s. They boast high reimbursement, free referrals, ability to accept insurance. They promise that they'll pay you timely, and sometimes they also bonus you to join or sign up with them. They, though ever increasingly, decide to sell client data, record sessions without permission, engage in unethical
Oh,
practice, but they're continued to grow because they are so big they can just pay the fines and move on. And in fact, a couple of them are set to
Whoa.
IPO this year, which is a very concerning thing because that means
mhm.
that shareholders and the profit margins are now all that matters. And I don't really think there's any room for that in mental health care. And it's very common that therapists don't understand the risks of being a 1099 contractor for a tech platform. Effectively, that platform is controlling the access and influence on how you're delivering your services. And they've also passed on almost all of the business risk to you. And they've written it all in the fine print of those contracts. And so you're taking all of the risk and responsibility, but they control a lot of the systems involved, including your insurance contract. And that can be taken almost at any time. And so that gig worker phenomenon, them providing, you know, this boastful, start your business with us sort of thing, um, it sounds like a good deal until you read the fine print.
Uh,
Hmm. Hmm.
okay. Ugh.
So, so those are the huge national level. Everybody sign on to and sign.
Mhm.
Give your soul to the devil things. Um, um, and with independence being important, how let's bring it back to like more like the large agency. Where do you see how certain practice models, especially larger agency, or like intermediary driven agencies, how do those impact how therapists are valued and reimbursed? What have you seen?
I see them sort of on different ends of the structural spectrum, right? So, um, agencies, right, or large group practices, they're businesses, and it's commonly misunderstood that just because they're large, that their business margins are healthy, and that's just simply not true.
Hmm.
Um, you can you can still outspend yourself and have very small margins and be very large scale. And
Hmm.
it costs a lot to provide a quality workplace and supply the necessary structures that support a business. And so agencies are struggling to keep up with venture capital on the other side with providing something competitive enough to attract and keep therapists employed with them. And so we're kind of going back to, or I think we're trying to swing the pendulum back more to like a collaborative group practice focus that's kept within clinicians because we've decided that
Hmm.
these intermediaries have now come in and boasted a big good deal, but most of us now have recognized that it's an exchange for our autonomy and increases our risk, and it's disguised as business, and it's not really a good deal for
Hmm.
most therapists. And so I know that sometimes group practices have some stereotypes around, quotas, caseload being too large, or younger therapists working with higher acuity clientele in their career, things like that. But not all group practices or agencies operate with those intentions, and there are great group practices out there who are um, offering work-life balance and trying to be competitive and care a lot about um, the clinicians that they're supporting. So
I
really,
hope that's.
what's that? Yeah.
I was just saying, I hope that's somewhat what people think of the Jonas Center. That's all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, okay. Having a supportive environment, for sure.
Yeah.
But you're right about finding it too. And I think we're going to speak a little bit later about values, and connecting values with who you are, kind of thing. So we can get into that more. But
well, I don't know. I don't think anyone's figured out how to make, or at least people haven't spent enough time figuring out how to make it so that groups can thrive, or how to make the burden of running and operating a successful large group practice so that it can survive. And that's something big that we're pushing. Like, you shouldn't be penalized for being big. But you should, and we should be able to allow for practices of all sizes to really, focus on how they believe they should deliver care for the people that they care for, which is a little bit of a different way of doing it versus just trying to bring people in, churn them, burn them, and you have to be on your phone 24/7 so you can answer that text, so you can get that $30 15-minute session because the client texted you through whatever app that is. And so that's one of my personal goals, or what we've wanted to do, is make it as easy as possible for people to practice, so they can grow, so they don't have to worry about all of the compliance, the insurance, the payments, all the stuff that isn't mental health or isn't focusing on growth. It's been a big dream of ours for sure.
Yeah.
Right. I remember signing on with you guys years ago, like before I even met your revenue minimum, I signed up. I remember I'm like, I'm gonna get there. I started
Yeah.
my private practice while I was still working for a, you know, residential mental health, and I was still working a full-time job, and I signed up with you guys right away. I'm like, I can't do it. I can't do it. I don't have time. I'm going to be working full-time and starting a business. I can't build two. So that is where our relationship began.
Yeah. And here you sit,
here
successful, growing, you're moving into new states. Like, it's all sorts of got a lot of great positive momentum after that, and I'm glad we were able to help you out as we've been able to over the years.
That's great. This history, I love. Shared history. Yeah. Well, and I mean, so you started out similar as I did, the way it sounds, with working full time and then starting a private practice on the side, kind of thing. And so, which brings me to my next question about, a solo practitioner. When is it time for them to consider, expanding, adding that, that employee or contractor? Can you speak to that a bit?
Yes, this is important for a few reasons, because I see people often who get burnt out and then they want to grow before they fix where things weren't quite going right in their own practice. So the first thing I ask people to do is consistently check that they are seeing the number of clients they want, they have hit their income ceiling, and also their business has to be running smoothly and they have to know their numbers. Your referrals have to be coming in. Okay. So, and you have to be able to not meet that need, or you have the confidence that there are untapped sources that you can quickly use to fill a caseload. Those are my, I guess, top tips.
How hard of a conversation is that in your experience? I mean, so also work with a lot of different types of providers, from solo on to larger groups. And what's that conversation, I know, can be very difficult when you're talking to somebody who wants to help people, and then also talking to the bottom line, the numbers side of it.
Right. Um, the thing is that people need to remember that when they're hiring, they have to have a good understanding of business flow, referral streams, and marketing. Because when you're solo, you're often viewing it as um, you're working for yourself, but you're not viewing it as a business machine. You're more
Mm-hmm.
looking at it as, all these referrals are mine. It
Yeah.
really takes cause for you. You have to step back and really market in a new way. And you need to have things going well in your practice to give you the bandwidth to learn those new skills. And it sometimes is difficult to tell people, hey, I know really want to grow right now, but you're coming at it and you're really burnt out. Let's go back to the numbers first. Let's make sure we've set you up sustainably,
Mm-hmm.
then we'll move to that next piece, because it's rarely successful, because people then tend to make a poor hiring decision. They make a quick decision, and then it doesn't always play out the way they want it to, because one failed hire can cost a business a good significant portion. So vetting is an
Yep.
important part
Yeah.
of bringing on team members.
It's interesting you said business machine, and that sometimes I know can be a little bit difficult to feel for somebody from the mental health field who comes up through that, because it's working with people isn't a machine. People aren't machines, but the business really does function like a machine. So it can be, in my experience working with new clients or people who are just starting their practices, it's a very unnatural way to think about helping humans and running this machine at the same time. Do you see what mistakes do you see people making in when they try to grow too quickly? I mean, you talked about burnout, not having their stuff, quick hires. Anything else that you're seeing as they're trying to help people and run this machine?
Yes, they sign too many leases, overextend themselves with their overhead. And they do not have a cushion in their business account to float them through until therapists start bringing in reimbursements, or they didn't think well about their reimbursement policies, and they're paying before they have the money coming in. There's a lot of things that shift when you go from solo to a group, and you have to now pay people on time and do it with structure, and you have to have your backbone and the numbers to back up what you paid out. And it's more than most people that are solo are used to, and doing the homework ahead of time and preparing yourself for those extra duties that you're going to have to do as a group practice owner, or the tasks that you're going to be responsible for, that you fully know and understand what you're signing up for.
Does anything stick out for you that you like? What was the hard lesson you learned, or a hard lesson you learned when you were starting your practice and then trying to grow it into something more than just an evenings thing or an evenings and weekends thing?
Yes, I would say too many supervisees at one time. That was the
Okay.
one mistake I made. Having too many interns versus licensed people, because it burnt me out to do so much supervision and so much oversight, and I lost sleep at night, because if I had a poor hire that was not doing their notes, signing their notes, I was losing sleep over it.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yep. You know what that's like.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Oh man.
And believe you me, I have so many conversations with practice owners. I think personnel management is like a huge thing I help practice owners with, because so many therapists are actually averse to having conversations about performance, or setting expectations, or actually enforcing boundaries and policies in their practice with their hired therapists. So.
And
Okay.
as things get tighter and tighter too, that's becoming more and more important. Both the running of the machine, and then just having having well defined boundaries and processes and policies, and then sticking to them, or collecting those copays and whatnot.
Yes. So Amber, the well-oiled machine. I'm kind of having a little issue with that
Oh yeah.
description, but I'm not sure what to do with that. So,
okay, we'll get back to that.
And I had another question, and I completely forgot it. So, where were we going? Skill set. And I think you've been talking about that. I mean, and you and I, are definitely. It's like, okay, I'm a therapist and I'm a business owner, and there are definitely different skill sets, and some people I've learned just want to be a therapist, and when I can provide that for them, that's great. But for me, I needed I needed more variety than that, and I just wondering about you, and what you think about the skill sets and that.
Very different skill sets. I feel like I got a secondary master's degree in
Hmm.
marketing, website design, payroll management, HR, all the things because of the
Yep.
hours and hours of paid coaching I've done, classes, courses taken to learn the skills necessary to be good at business, not just good at
Hmm.
being a clinician, which you'd think comes naturally, but it does not to most therapists. It made a big difference to take a lot of classes, courses, and do a lot of extra learning because it does not come natural to therapists.
Well, I probably took some business and management courses, but I also feel like, yeah, I learned it on my own too a lot, and it took a lot of hours to learn that business side of things. That's for sure. Like a second master's degree, like you were saying, I like that. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Well,
yeah.
a lot of therapists. Let's shift gears a little bit. And so I'm just thinking of the number of therapists who are drawn to that small collective model. So let's talk about that. And agency models. But let's start with the small collective. What makes that appealing when done well? And if you can, what does done well look like?
Sure. Well, I think that in a small collective, each therapist is maintaining autonomy, but they have a clear outlined agreement on what is going to be shared, what structures that they all agree on that they want to have in place. And it's collaborative. I would say a good environment, or how to do it well has a lot to do with making sure that the therapists who are in the collective actually work well together or mesh well together, because logistics are one thing, but day to day practice is another, right? And if you're in a collective, you do all have your individual business goals, and you are somewhat still independent of your shared collective. So there
Mhm.
are some reasons to be sure that the people that you are joining, you're kind of like entering agreements with other business owners, right? So you want to make sure that the agreements that you're making make sense, that they're fair and equitable, that everyone is fully in awareness of what shared expenses are, what you're doing on your own, and who's responsible for what of the greater tasks. There's usually someone
Mhm.
who is kind of the head of the collective, or the somebody who's kind of
Mhm.
spearheading, or making sure that or it kind of moves more like an organized group.
Hmm. Okay. Well, and looking at that versus a traditional agency model, how would you contrast that, Amber?
I would say the difference is because if you're in more of an agency model, I expect or most often see a W-2 setup, less
Okay.
1099. So they're
Mhm.
working for the practice as an employee. And that opens you up to taking on pre-licensed clinicians,
Mhm.
because usually these folks that are still working towards licensure need supervision. And over the years, we've kind of determined that it's not really suitable to have them in a 1099 position because too much of their work is dictated and they wouldn't pass the classifications test.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple years ago, when all that was kind of changing at the Department of Labor, I worked with a lot of business owners to kind of switch over into more of an employment model because they had founded group practices, including pre-licensed clinicians, but they had done so um, with a 1099 model, but it doesn't really fit the current practice standard. So
Yeah.
that is what I see as the primary differences. Collectives are more independent, usually fully licensed. And I say that usually because there are some, um, you know, exceptions there. But
Mm-hmm.
majorly, those therapists and collectives they have more autonomy in their work. And then those who are working for an agency have said, I'm signing up to represent this business, and this business has these policies and these procedures and these systems, and I'm here working on behalf of them. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of a
Mm-hmm.
kind of a, different way of viewing your role as a therapist or
Mm-hmm.
person in the business.
Yeah, it's almost like a philosophical alignment and shared resources versus the philosophy of the business or the practice or whatever the practice owner came through. There's a less influence and less autonomy in the agency model versus the collective model. That's what I hear you saying. What so for therapists thinking about these models, what should they be thinking about, or what are what can you inform their decisions a little bit on these two anymore?
Right. So I would say if you are leaning towards a collective, you like the idea of having your own business, and you probably have some dream at some point of growing or having really your own way of doing business, and you can determine what you want your caseload to look like, what you offer, if you accept insurance or not. Like, you pretty much have um, autonomy, right? In more of a collective
Mm-hmm.
space where you're your own business. In a group practice or more agency feel, um, you're having more things given to you as a role. So you're told, we're hiring for a therapist role, and this role means that you see this amount of clients per week to be full time, and your notes are due within this amount of time after you see a client. There's more
Mm-hmm.
prescribed guidelines, and then your documentation and how you manage the business tends to be more standardized than in the collective. So if you like more freedom, more flexibility, more choice, you might vibe with the collective. If you like to come to work and, show up, do your clinical roles, and you don't want to worry about your administrative duties or um, all other types of marketing or anything like that, you might enjoy being a W-2 for a group practice and just, coming and going and seeing clients. And then if you want to start a group or you want to grow into a group, I'd really ask you to define your why. And it has to be more than make money, because we all
Yes,
know that
Okay.
this is not what we do.
that's the
That's
bottom
not going
line.
to
We need
work.
Yeah.
we need the top
Yeah.
line.
Right. Right. Oh shoot. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and on that note, I'm looking. It's like insurance,
Money and marketing
money,
and markets.
and markets and everything, and credentialing, and all the headaches that go on with insurance. It's like that can be one of the hardest things for practice owners. I think actually for me, I've gone back and forth, but I've got a rural setting in Glencoe out there, and I could never go to like a cash basis out in that area at all. So that makes the decision for me, and it's always been that way. It's been that model. But so what other things should therapists consider before joining insurance plans?
Ooh, yeah. Well, I think you want to pay attention to what's being asked of you for documentation requirements, because
Mm,
we know that those are becoming more and more extensive,
Mm-hmm.
and insurance has kind of developed a little bit of a reputation for conducting audits and issuing notices for clawbacks that seem a bit arbitrary. And so you want to make sure that whatever panels you decide to pursue, you're comfortable with the contract that you're signing, and you've maybe done a little research to see how that plan is operating in your general geographic area, because it really
Mm.
does depend on state by state. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you have, especially nationally, like if you, like Aetna is not the same place to place to place, so you
Mm.
have
Mm-hmm.
to think about where you are, for geography, and then ask for the fee schedule ahead of time. Don't sign on before you know what you're going to be reimbursed for your 90837s, 90834s, 90871s, all the things. You want to make sure
Mm-hmm.
you're comfortable with those rates that you're signing, up to accept, because they're probably not going to change much until they update their fee schedules, and or you submit, a plea for an increase, which is not always too successful, but every once in a
Mm-hmm.
while someone gets thrown a bone and might get like a 5 cent raise, from their
Yeah.
request.
Okay. Oh my
Yeah, and
gosh.
it's hard, and the provider themselves has to do it. We tried to help some people with that, and it's not anything that can be helped. You, the owner, have to do most of the legwork on that.
Mm.
Mhm.
So.
Yeah.
So, uh, yeah, well, and insurance too. I know, like in the cities, you can do. It is a little bit easier to do a cash pay practice, but I also, have seen. I've seen more people switching to cash pay or going to cash pay, rather than taking on insurance panels. But the flip side of that is, you have to build your own market. Like, you are in a market where you're fighting against anybody who wants to use their insurance
Mm.
versus having access to clients who do want to use their insurance as well. And so it's kind of a decision about who you serve and how you serve them, I think. And so I know you've talked about this being like a moral ethical dilemma a little bit,
Mhm.
but talk a little bit more about the tension, between access to care or being able to provide care, and then the financial sustainability of your practice, or for your clients too, for them to have access to care and their financial sustainability.
Right. And I would say that the thing is it's really complex, because
Mm-hmm.
access to insurance provides access to care, but even over the years, like, insurance is actually becoming more unaffordable and not, as sustainable, especially as of January. We heard we no longer have subsidies for health insurance, so
Mm-hmm.
now I think more people might choose to go uninsured. Personally, I've been thinking about ways to accommodate those clients. Deductibles and co-insurance costs have risen quite high, and clients aren't even able to afford their benefits, but they're paying, $25,000 a year in premiums, and certainly want to use their insurance when they need a service that's covered. And so I find that dilemma to be difficult. It's like, how are you supposed to come out of pocket, for so much for your premiums, and then also for, your care? So paying privately doesn't make sense when you have to pay so much to,
Mm.
just gain access to healthcare coverage. So it seems like it's kind of a catch-22 where you can't really
Mm-hmm.
win. And a lot of times, we talk about deductible season, where, now deductibles have gotten
Right.
so high, therapists have a headache from January to March every year,
Yep.
because
Right.
and we're chasing down clients who have to pay our full fee until they reach, the contracted fee, at least until they reach their deductible. And
Yep.
so they're
Mm-hmm.
paying more
Mm-hmm.
market rates. And so they actually come to therapy less often. They slow down their
Mm-hmm.
services, things like that. So it does become kind of, you have to watch the gas pedal, right? Of like what the market is doing, and then also what the healthcare industry is doing, and decide for yourself what makes sense to serve the people in your geographical area. Because I know for sure, like, where I am, I could build probably a cash pay practice, but it would stay niche. I wouldn't grow into a group, or I wouldn't grow into
Mm. Right.
larger models, because that wouldn't be sustainable in this geographic area. But insurance it's super easy to catch referrals for insurance in this geographic area. And so it's very easy to become a successful practice owner from that regard, if you're willing to do a little bit of legwork and marketing for
Mm.
yourself.
I was just having a conversation with somebody about and at Breezy, we call it the dark times, the first quarter of the year, the first 3 months. There's a little, by the end of the year, everyone's hit their deductibles. Many have hit their out-of-pocket maxes. So the revenue flows until about mid-January. And then after that, it's all, unless you're taking payment upfront for balances. If you are invoicing, that's up to a 30-day delay on getting paid. Yeah. For a lot of these providers. And so I was having that conversation with somebody prepping her because she's like, I made more money, at the end of the year here than I expected to. And I said, well, I hold on to that. Don't spend that, because after, about mid-January, things are going to be getting a little rough and it's going to feel like you're not making any money. But really it's just because there's these delays that are built into the revenue cycle that you got to deal with.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And you learn to weather those storms. When you've been in practice longer, you learn to weather that. You start to see it. So after having several years of business data, I can almost verifiably tell you when those cycles occur, because it's pretty reliable. And so I've learned not to even get nervous. I just know that this is a time of year where I have a little bit more instability with my revenue cycle, but usually the year ends strong, like you said. So we just kind of hold for 30 days and we get back on track after the year gets rolling.
And we build in February and March, we build in a 20% dip. Like, it's just expected and planned because everything gets delayed by that much. And it is what it is. And as long as you can plan for it, and that's why it's important, especially for new providers starting out, or group practices just getting off the ground, like, you need to be prepared, and especially for W-2. If you have somebody on wage or salary, because you're going to have to keep paying them, even though you got to wait a month to get paid as well. So that transition, the end of the year, also for some plans, the middle of the year, that July 1st as well, is another time to kind of watch for that.
Yeah. Well, so is there, what I'm hearing from both of you is, like, there's probably no way to avoid that, and it's kind of the natural ebb and flow of things. And I would agree with you. It's like, are there, besides holding on to that last bit that you get at the end of the year kind of thing, and making sure you got a bit of a balance going into the dark times. I mean, are there other things therapists can do, to weather that storm, marketing, do you do some cash? I stay away from the cash, and being on insurance panels, I really try and avoid cash, just because that can complicate things a lot. So I don't know. Any advice, Amber? Any other advice you've got?
Yes. And here's how I handle it. I schedule my CE talks, my retreats and group programs, my other services during my low revenue months. So when I talk with therapists about growing their practices and they're stuck at their income ceiling as a solo, and before they bring on somebody, I help them decide, how can you bring in more money to your practice that isn't sitting in your therapy chair and seeing a client one-to-one, and how can we do that during the times of the year where you have the most bandwidth and the least amount of money.
That's a great call.
Yeah, definitely. Didn't think about that.
Oh yeah.
Make a note.
So we're talking a little bit about platforms, and then if we could get into long-term business plans a little bit. Like, there's this common belief that joining these large platforms is a solid long-term plan. I know a lot of people think that and it is. It's kind of like you were saying. They're wowed by everything. There's monies, there's bonuses, there's all this stuff coming in. From a long-term standpoint, why do you see that as a misconception?
Well, for starters, they can change your contract at any time or cease to exist overnight. And you've also signed up for having your rates negotiated for you and on your behalf, and you no longer have a say in whether they're decreased or changed. And a lot of times they are putting a promotionary rate in front of you for the first year that you're with them, and then they're slashing them thereafter when they renegotiate their rates. Insurance companies are smart, and they know what they're doing, and they want to get as many therapists as possible on one group contract so that they can control our rates, and they are controlling rate setting, and they are trying to initiate outcome-based pay measures, which is going to mean that if your clients don't get better on their GAD and their PHQ, and they're not doing the stuff that big tech thinks equals progress, you will not be paid well for the services you are providing. And that's pretty much cutting out an entire market of our, chronically mentally ill folks, or people who, have trauma or PTSD or other, difficult conditions to treat. And so it is not, you can lose your ability to bill insurance overnight. They can say that they no longer need you at any time, right? And you have no protection from that. And I'd say, in contrast to that, it's really not that hard to get credentialed. There are lots of companies, Phoenix, plug there for that one, and coaches out there that can guide you through that process at a pretty affordable cost. When I started, I did it all myself. I credentialed myself with my first set of insurance companies. Now, if I don't want to deal with it, I call you guys. But it's not really that hard. So
right,
it is, and it's
a bunch of paperwork.
Yes.
I would say it's insanely hard, but if you have patience, you will get through it. You just have to be prepared to bang into wall after wall after wall after wall, because and we've talked about this before on this program, but even the reps don't know what the right answer is sometimes.
Oh yeah,
so
that's
fill
true.
it out and somebody else processes it and you get a big no, and now you're 30, 60, 90 days delayed as a result. And so that's another thing, is like, if you want to have control of your future, contract, get yourself your own contracts, work through that process. It's short-term pain for very long-term gain.
Yeah.
Yes, I know I'm preaching to the choir here.
Yeah, I know, but okay, so I think we've kind of covered the risks and everything, of getting getting aligned with the wrong platforms, something like that. But I'm wondering about advice. Wait, where are we? Now
Here,
what? Where are
I want to pull a cut?
Yeah. Okay.
Cut, Sam, cut.
Did you wait?
I just skipped that whole section because we basically covered all three.
Yeah. Okay.
Right,
all right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to figure that in. Okay.
Just
great.
If I highlight it, just read it.
I think we forgot. We haven't talked about yet how to get these therapists. What do you want them to do if they're already on them? We haven't talked about that.
Oh.
What do we want to do to get those therapists off those platforms?
I think that's a great idea to talk about.
Well, we can do that. So, Sam, let's start over.
There we go, Sam. All right.
So Amber, if you're on a platform, and you're finding out that, oh boy, this was a bad decision, for whatever reasons, how do you get off?
Yeah. Well, first of all, know how much notice you need to give. Some of these platforms are putting it in contracts, how much notice you need to give. And you also need to ensure continuity of care for the clients that you are serving. And don't, necessarily let them bully you too much about that. You do have the right to inform them about their choices, and make sure that they have continuity of care when you're ending with a platform. Plan for a brief period of transition, right? So you don't need to quit everything at once. If you are in, the depths of working on 3 or 4 platforms and you want to become more independent, start just by figuring out how you could credential with one insurance company that you're not currently affiliated with, right? Take one step in that right direction, or launch one service or revenue stream that isn't dependent on this intermediary platform. And then once you start building things outside of it, you can eventually give notice. And sometimes these clients that are on the intermediaries follow you to your practice. They don't want you to know that, but they do, because they still want to see you. And some of them will pay your private rate if you're no longer in network with their insurance, or some of them will come back to you after you've gotten credentialed on your own.
Yeah, and you can get yourself a contract, and some contracts this does matter, some it doesn't. But as long as you're seeing one client on that contract, submitting one claim on that, then it counts. Others, if you get a contract and you don't submit after 90 days, they'll just terminate the contract. So you do have to watch out for that. So as you add these contracts, as you're building this up, start your little, it's like your little mini side. I guess it'd be a side hustle if you're doing some of this gig stuff. Start your little mini thing on the side. Start with one client on each contract probably, and then roll from there. Because the contracting process, depending on what state you're in, can be quite arduous. It can be, it's difficult at best and arduous in some ways. Like, in our state of Minnesota, we tell people it's 8 months. It could be up to a year if there's any problems. And so you do need to be prepared for that. And as long as you go in eyes wide open, it can be a successful, smooth transition for sure.
Cool. All right. Well, so if we transition here a little bit, I want to ask you this, Amber. Like, if you've got a therapist who wants to grow their practice without sacrificing that work-life balance, what advice would you give them?
I would say consider your lifestyle first, then build a practice that sustains it, not the other way around. Start with your lifestyle first, and you'll hear that a lot. Don't focus so much on what everyone else is doing. Focus on what you need to be sustainable and successful without burnout, and then build a practice that sustains that. Whether client work is what you love and live for, or whether you need to have multiple different capacities like I do. Like, I need to do continuing education talks, I need to coach therapists, I see a caseload of clients, and do clinical work. These things are very much dependent on who you are as a human, what you like to do in your clinical capacity, what your skill set is. And the biggest way to stress yourself out is to start something that you feel very uncomfortable with, or you don't have, or haven't done the research, or gotten resources to learn what you need to be successful there. So don't sacrifice your lifestyle to build a practice. Do it the other way around. And then if one-to-one therapy doesn't, if that's getting you stuck, because most of the time coaching clients are feeling stuck. They're like, I'm seeing all the therapy I can do. I'm tired. I need something else. I say, do something else then. Decide to start speaking, and doing CEs, or go to HR companies and offer workplace trainings for employees on stress, or you can do umpteen things. I've consulted on so many different types of mental health things for on contract, because you can really create any type of business you want, and therapists are functional in a multitude of capacities. You don't always need to just seek growing as a clinician by having a group or hiring a bunch of people. That is one way to go, but there are others as well.
Great.
So, and it sounds like that you'll help people come up with some of these, or think through these things, because this clearly, as you're describing it, and I think with any business, like, it does require a lot of thought and intentionality, and this is something that people need to work through. So you've recommended hiring a coach. I think I heard you say you've had coaches to help with stuff like that. I know you coach as well, and then creating this strategic plan. Why do that?
Because when you hire a coach, there's someone in your corner. If you're going off, especially on your own or trying to create something, it can be lonely, and having somebody there to provide encouragement, follow up with you, helps you keep your progress in motion. Usually, you're dealing with someone with insight into your industry. They have experience. They've been where you are at one point and know how to solve this problem. And when you're feeling overwhelmed, foggy, and unsure, which most of us do at some point, having a coach helps you remember your priorities and put you back at square one. You can spin your wheels real fast, and then your coach can say, wait a minute, what were our action steps this week? And you can get yourself back on track, because the coach helps you to reflect on your progress, track what makes sense, and keep pace with your changes. And I really enjoy helping business owners grow those businesses. It's very rewarding to watch them be successful. It's like, I mean, it's crazy to me, some of the stories, like where I've had people open up 4 or 5 different group practice locations while they've coached with me, and I'm just like, this is amazing. This is more than I've done. I've coached people doing bigger things than I've done, and it's
Yeah.
amazing to
Cool.
me.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so I find that to be such an honor, but it's also super, helpful just to have someone there who can hold a container for what you're creating, and be a good resource and somebody that is showing up, because I know I always showed up way better when I had some accountability, and a lot of therapists do. So
Yeah.
Excuse
Well,
me. Yeah.
and Amber, I do have to. I think I have to give you some thanks here too. I'm trying to remember how long ago it was we had met for lunch, and it's not 5 years. I know it's not 5 years but it was a few years ago. And I remember you talking about just how thankful you were that you had some of the consultants that you did and how they greatly helped your business, and that inspired me to bring that up, to start really thinking about like how can we best utilize consultants to support our business, and that led to a lot of well, you got to kiss a lot of frogs, but when you find good consultants, it led to a lot of really good people that have helped our business in many, many ways.
There were a few frogs.
A couple.
Yeah. but yeah, finding good people, good consultants or coaches. Yeah, definitely. You feel like you have someone in your corner, for sure.
Just like, yeah.
And someone who's been there. Yeah, that's great. Oh, well, okay. Amber, how about practice owners measuring like, how can they measure success beyond just the dollars? And, certainly it's like maintaining that work-life balance. I'm hearing you say that. But how else can they measure success?
I'd like to keep that pretty simple, and it's impact and reputation in your community of doing great work,
Oh, yeah.
because that is ultimately your biggest compliment, right? Like, therapists often fail to see the impact that they make on people. Like, I've been seeing the posts recently from therapists online of how many minutes they spent in therapy, how many sessions they did, and how many notes they wrote, and all these things for the year. And I started thinking about the greater impact of like the thousands of clients I've
Mm.
sat with over my career as a therapist, and how many lives that has touched. And I think that we fail to do that on a regular basis. And that is something that we can take pride in, that's way beyond financial gain, and
Mm-hmm.
way beyond,
Mm-hmm.
getting that reward with the dollars. That's important, but so is the doing of the work and the impact.
Well, and that feeling, like, the impact on the community, what you're saying, and just, I want to say feeling the satisfaction of doing a good job. And I also, I don't know, when you said simple, I was thinking, well, I want to be generally happy, and happy with what I'm doing, and proud, of what I've done, and, what I do contribute. But it's like having that sense of, I like this, kind of thing. So,
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. And I mean, you can, when you build a practice that you love, it doesn't feel as heavy to go to work every day. I mean, it really
oh,
doesn't. So,
true.
you know,
Very true. Yep. Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. So,
Well, Amber, this has been a thoughtful, this has been a grounding conversation. Thank you for bringing your human-centered perspective to growth in private practice.
well, absolutely. I think a lot of listeners are going to walk away from here feeling more empowered to choose that model that truly fits, them and their personality, not just what feels expected or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. But before we wrap up, we do always like to ask, what do you have going on right now? Anything to share or promote, or anything at all?
We have some exciting things, or I do anyways, coming up in 2026.
Ooh,
First off,
yeah.
if you need a business coach, if you are in need of business coaching services, I'd love to help you with your private practice. So you can check out my website, savvytherapist.com. I have a lot of free resources on there. You can email me And my email for that is amber@savvytherapist.com. And I offer single sessions and coaching packages to therapists who are in that building phase. And aside from business coaching, my clinical practice, SkillSpark Therapy, is growing and expanding this year. As we kind of spoke a little bit about, I've been a Minnesota provider for 6 years, and now I'm moving into Wisconsin. And if being a business owner isn't for you, but you'd like to be part of an amazing team instead, I'd love to hear from you.
Perfect.
And I believe in providing support to that new generation of therapists. The practice that I've grown is pretty creative, integrative, and open to therapists with different styles, both licensed and pre-licensed. We accept most major insurance. I have a thriving virtual practice and options for in-person care in Woodbury and River Falls. I am an approved supervisor with the Minnesota Board of MFT and the Board of Behavioral Health. So if you'd like to submit a resume, you can do so by emailing Amber at admin, ADMIN, at skillsparktherapy.com.
Fantastic. Great. And just from knowing you, Amber, if anybody ends up, anybody who joins you will really appreciate making that decision. I know that.
Yeah. Great. Oh, shoot. Paul, what about you? Okay.
Yeah.
What about you, and what's on your horizon here?
I've been thinking a lot about supporting people at that level lately, at the human level, and just how important it is to be real and be willing to go to bat for the people who support you. And it's been, I've had some really great experiences with that lately and really digging into what that means. So trying to focus on continuing to do that. We've been doing these 10 random 10 acts of kindness, 10 good deeds. I can never remember what we call it, but we turned 10 last year. And so I'm about 3/4 of the way through, maybe. I've got a few more good deeds to do, and I'm hoping to get a few more of those done this weekend. So
what have you done?
Let's see. I scraped a few cars, scraped the ice.
Scraped this,
got
their sides?
The snow and ice.
Oh,
yeah.
That.
With the scraper. Okay. Gave away a few ice scrapers. I could not believe the number of people I've seen this that I've seen this winter that did not have an ice scraper with them.
Okay.
So I've given 2 of the darn things away. We put in for some gift cards and dropped those off at a retirement home for some of the folks who for one of the local grocery chains. And so some of the folks there who relied on delivery services to get their groceries, but were on Social Security, they participated as well. So we've got all these cool things that we've done, and a few more cool things to come too. I'm excited. Oh yeah. Salvation Army bell ringing. So we did. I don't know. Well, cut. I don't know if we can say who we did that for, but. I can say so we definitely rang some bells and raised some money as well as part of that on a cold winter day.
Wow.
Shoveled a neighbor's driveway too. That was pretty fun.
Yeah.
And I just, it's good to be outside when it's cold. How about you? What have you been doing?
What's on my horizon is continuing to be a grandparent. So I've got your kids next weekend, and then the following weekend we go to Chicago for the other grandchild. So that's my horizon, and the good things.
That's
good
a nice
things.
horizon.
Oh yeah. So great. All right. Well. So make sure you follow us wherever you get your podcasts and share this episode with a colleague who's thinking about growing their practice.
And big thanks to Amber and her practice SkillSpark and her coaching practice Savvy Therapist for coming on today and talking a bit about some of these difficult decisions that are important to be very mindful of. Don't forget to sign up for our weekly newsletter for more insights on running a behavioral health practice. It's called Trade Winds. Every Friday we send that out. Yeah. And then with that said, I guess until next time,
keep your eyes on the horizon.